All right. Hello. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you taking some time to jump on with us here today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jesse Hill, and I'm the president of Tier 3 IT Solutions. And today we're going to dive into, what is arguably one of the more popular topics that we hear about, which is AI. And we want to try to strip away some of the hype and really talk about how you can utilize AI in your business right now. So one of the things that I want to encourage is some live interaction. So if you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A. I'm joined by Tin Mar, our sales operations analyst. She's going to be watching a little bit of that, helping me make sure that the content we're giving you today is relevant and actionable to all of you who have attended. Um, so the first thing is that AI feels like it's everywhere. You hear a lot of vendors and software companies and just businesses in general saying that they are powered by AI. And it sounds like it's going to drastically change, all of our businesses. Some tell us it's going to help us build better businesses than we've ever had. Some tell us that it's probably going to destroy our businesses and the models and the things that we used to have. And so as business owners, business leaders, it can be exhausting trying to keep up with all of this, trying to decipher it and really understand, practically how we can, get ahead of this particular, tool. One of the things that I mention a lot when I talk about AI is it's kind of a very broad term. It's akin to me going to my wife and saying, I'd like to travel more. Well, what does that mean when I say travel more? Right? That could be going on a bike tour, it could be going on a cruise, it could be doing an all-inclusive, it could be going on, a cross-country train voyage. AI is the same thing. You're hearing people say that you should be using AI without really the specificity that you would need to be able to tangibly make decisions about how you're going to do that. And so we've got different groups of businesses that we talk to. We've got some businesses who are all in, on AI. They've invested in new tools. They're, reworking org charts and business processes and all those types of things. And then we've got, probably the larger group of business owners who are a little bit skeptical. They're asking questions. They want to know how it works. And they want to see actual progress or actual capabilities before they decide that they're going to get started. So the challenge today isn't that there aren't enough tools. It's probably that there's too many tools available. There's conflicting advice, and it's difficult to know where you can actually leverage and implement AI in your business today. So we want to go a little bit beyond that. We want to talk about how most businesses are actually leveraging, AI today, and hopefully some ways that you can get started and implement some things. So I mentioned this on the last one. So, AI, of course, it's this big umbrella term, and really what it means, it's a predictive software. It's looking for patterns in data and it's making predictions based on what it's seen in the past. And, the foundation of the training material is the information that's been made available to it. So while we like to think that AI is generative and, it's creating new things, it's building it all off previous knowledge base, knowledge sets. And so I think one of the most important things that we've been encouraging people to think about is not to think of AI as a replacement for humans, but as an enhancement or an augmentation. Humans are still going to be the ones who use their judgment, who, do a lot of the critical thinking, and hopefully that are defining the inputs that are going to refine the outputs in a way that's, faster and more efficient than if they were to do it themselves. So there are different types of AI tools and platforms that do different things. They've been around for a long, long time that might sort and filter information. Some are now generating images and text, and we'll talk about those a little bit. And where you're likely going to see AI enhancements or progress in the coming years is around what is called agentic AI. So right now we are mostly used to generative AI, which are tools like ChatGPT and Copilot and Google Gemini that are creating text. Agentic AI, an agent, is an AI platform that takes data, takes an input, and actually takes or makes actionable steps moving forward. Um, so we're going to dig into a couple of these because generative is what we see most. That's what we're going to focus on today. So, like I just mentioned, generative AI is designed to create drafts around content. It can really help you a lot around emails, social media posts, summarizing documents, and even simple graphics. And the thing to note about this is that it's doing all of this creation based off of the prompts and the information that you provide to it. And you can think of it as a very fast and capable assistant. Um, so when you think about it in that context, and we'll see when we get into the example, if you hired a new person into your team today and you approached them and said, "Can you make us an ad for a special that we're running this weekend?" Well, there's a lot of information that's missing out of that request. So a human would have to pull up old advertisements. They'd have to understand what is the promotion that we're running? What are we trying to achieve with this? Who's our target market? And they're going to hopefully learn those things over time and develop a process so that when you ask them that question, they can respond. AI, when we give it the right context and the right information, can do that, much faster. Now, the important thing that's on here and that we really want to stress is the human staying in control. And I think that this is one of the important elements that we believe is that AI is here to help enhance your team, take away that mundane work, accelerate their capacity and their capability for certain types of work. So we want to think of it as a support tool and not a decision-making function within the business. So I already kind of discussed this, and the way that we think about generative AI is that it's a really strong first draft creator. So if we're working on a particularly challenging email, a policy update, we've probably all used them for summarizing meeting notes and those types of things. But you've probably noticed that AI has its own tone, its own style that it's bringing to the table. And you want to make sure that any documents or things that you're creating with it, that they have been reviewed, adapted, tailored, and are, true to your brand voice, your standards, your policies, all of those types of things. So AI adds value, but the human judgment still needs to be, the lead at this. We've gone through a couple of these items already, and the thing about generative AI is that it's it's starting to be integrated into so many of our day-to-day tasks. You've probably noticed already that, when you're doing searches on Google, you're starting to get a lot more AI results. Um, I mean, when we think back, even years ago, grammar check, spell check, suggested, punctuation and formatting and all of those types of things are kind of early stages of how we were using AI. And where generative AI really helps is in that repetitive, text heavy kind of situations where you're trying to get something, across into, whether it's text or it's going to be a presentation, and you just need help getting it started. Um, Instead of having to start, actually writing the document, you can just ask the question and say, I'm thinking about, writing a policy around this, particular topic. These are the things I'm concerned about. Help me create that. And again, I'm going to highlight it over and over is that we'll use the AI to get us the starting point. We then use the human to refine it. Obviously, AI only knows what it has been told. And this is where I think it's been interesting watching some of the AI platforms develop over time. So when ChatGPT first burst onto the scene a couple years ago, um, it had basically scanned all of the information on the internet that was accessible, but it was back a couple of years. They purposely didn't allow it to get, any of the content that was, within the last, I think it was maybe even 2 years. And they did that for a couple of reasons, but eventually through different models, it kind of caught up to current date. But more importantly, it didn't have any of your business's custom, unique, important information. Nowadays, if you go into your Chat GPT profile, you can give it source information. If you're using Copilot, you can link it to internal documents. And the reason that you're doing that is, when we look at this list of what it's not good about or not good at, knowing what matters most in your business, well, it doesn't know that yet, but you can start training it. You can start giving it that context. And we'll talk a little bit about how to do that in individual chats. We want to be really clear, particularly if you're thinking about using generative AI for any type of policies or legal documents or those types of things. Um, it's not the same as trusting a professional, and I should say it's not the same as trusting a professional in any field. However, in those areas of your business where there's um, a high bar for compliance, it is really important that you are getting professional third party insight into how these types of agreements and all those should be structured. Um, yeah, making the judgment calls. You know, it's not a decision maker. And if any of you have spent any time, conversing with an AI, chat type of tool, you'll notice that it tends to agree with you. It tends to reinforce, whatever you are, um, I guess, saying and agreeing with it. And so you want to make sure that you're not allowing it to bias your decision because it's just overly positive around what you're saying. So, if you wouldn't send an employee, like a brand new employee, out to meet with a client without reviewing and training and refining, their presentation and their messaging and the content, we should be thinking about generative AI the same way. It's like a junior team member. It's helpful and fast, but it needs to be supervised. And so we need to make sure that we are building it into a productive tool instead of, potentially an area of risk within our businesses. So, like we said, we want to talk about some practical ways that we can leverage generative AI. So we've got some items on here. I think that everybody understands that when you're using generative AI, the thing to do is to have some clarity about what it is you are looking to accomplish, generally formed in a question. You want to give some context around, what's important to you, what you're looking for, maybe challenges you've had in the past, and then, ask it for its assistance and have that conversation where you're refining it, throughout that process. So, as I just mentioned, the human decides the goal. The prompt needs to be intentional. What needs to be accomplished? We give that to the AI who produces a draft, and then the human reviews and refines. And this process on here could actually be a little bit circular because in a lot of circumstances we're gonna refine, draft, provide context, change things, and it's like having, like we said earlier, like having that assistant that we're bouncing ideas with back and forth. Now, if you're not, sure where to start, the five that are listed on here are the five, probably biggest players right now. But there are hundreds of AI platforms out there. They all have um, different algorithms and data sets and rules and capabilities and limitations and ways that they do things. And so, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, you may find that you want to use a different tool than what you've got listed here. So we want to start, we want to talk here about prompting, because ultimately today with generative AI, when we are trying to use it in our businesses, it all starts, well, I suppose first by selecting a tool, one of the platform here. Um, and before I jump into the next part around prompting, I am going to just highlight that each of these has different configuration options and different security options. Now, if you are a business that is, concerned about protecting your information, you might want to consider tools like Microsoft Copilot over the other ones because uh, it's kind of like a private AI in that it accesses the information in your SharePoint and it doesn't use that to train the model for other organizations. If you're going to use something like ChatGPT or Google Gemini, you're going to want to make sure that you go in and you turn off any of the learning um, configurations, the settings. So in ChatGPT, there's an option where you have to turn the slider off so that it does not use your data in their model, for training. And that's just I think, a good general rule. And it's unfortunately a little bit counterintuitive because the more data the model has, the better it can do. Um, but you don't want your data to be shared, externally with other organizations. So we wanted to do this, kind of close to live. You'll see here we've got five different levels of prompting, and again, it's that idea of saying if AI is like a really fast and capable assistant, the better the request that you make to that person, to that AI, the better the result that you're going to get back. So I took this a little just earlier today, and I actually used three different AI agents so that we can see what this looks like. And the concept was we're going to pretend that we are a dental office, and our level one, our very basic, type of prompting, it lacks a lot of the context to be able to provide really good feedback. So the prompt just said, create a social media post with an image to promote my dental practice, Bright Smile Dental. Within a couple of minutes on ChatGPT, it produced the image that we're looking at here. Now, it did all that without asking for any clarifying information about our location, our number of years in business, the types of clients we serve, any of those types of items. And I mean, it's amazing to think that it was able to do this in a matter of minutes without any of that information. I put it into Google Gemini and we received the image on the left, and in Microsoft Copilot, the image on the right. Now, the reason I think this is interesting is because we see, first of all, I think you'd probably recognize that the first image from ChatGPT and the third image, the one on the right here from Microsoft Copilot, are pretty similar in their, kind of feel. And that could be because Microsoft Copilot ties in and utilizes the ChatGPT engine in their AI platform. Whereas Google Gemini is obviously a very different, feel than the other two. But generally speaking, these are all very basic, generic, not very refined um, posts. We then go to the level two. Now, I want to point out that there's not a lot of added specificity that we put into here, except to say to promote my dental cleaning services. And the reason that I bring that up is that that small amount of specificity is all it needs to understand that, oh, okay, well, a dental office, kind of like we talked about travel, travel can be anything. Well, if we're going to promote a dental office, I mean, we could be talking about cleanings, root canals, polishing, fluoride, whatever, a whole bunch of different things. So by adding just that one little bit of specificity, it then, in ChatGPT was able to come along and kind of refine it. We'll notice that it put together a little bit of text that we could use for our Facebook post, and slightly better detail because we've defined that service. Now we'll notice that the Gemini, I feel like it kind of covered up a lot of the warmth and the feel of it because they were trying to jam more information in here. And then, I mean, I don't know how you feel about the Copilot one on the right there, but there is more context because of that, little bit of specificity that we didn't have before. Now, write a 100 word Facebook post from my dental practice. So we've specified, what we're looking for in terms of length. We're aimed at adults with children who are looking for a new dentist, inviting them to schedule a teeth cleaning. Include an image of someone getting their teeth cleaned. So we've become more targeted. We're accepting new patients. The family-friendly side of things, is really important. Anybody with kids knows that you want to get a dentist that, enjoys working with those kids. And but because we've added those extra comments in there, it's taken that and incorporated it in here. Now, the first thing that I noticed that's interesting is we told it to attract adults with children, and we said include an image of someone getting their teeth cleaned, and we got an adult getting their teeth cleaned. So when we got to Gemini, we can see there, well, it actually figured out that maybe we should have a photo of a child getting their teeth cleaned if that's who we're trying to attract. Kind of looks like the child's mother is there. They're friendly, they're all smiling. And so it's interesting how looking at the different models, you get that little bit different output. And what I thought was particularly interesting on this one was we see Microsoft Copilot says, sorry, I couldn't generate the image for that request. If you'd like, I can try a slightly different concept. Now, it gave us the 100-word Facebook post, but it didn't give us, that image that we needed. So, again, just each platform has different strengths, different limitations, all of those types of things. Now, the level four, this is where things get, much more dialed in. So we can see, first of all, what we've done is we've defined a role. And this is very helpful no matter what you're trying to put together, is to say, I'm an HR manager, in this type of business. So in this case, I'm the office manager. We gave some context. What is our industry? Who is our audience? What is our location? What is our objective? We talk about the brand tone. So we can see here, about being family friendly and fun and all those types of things. What is the task that we're looking for? What are the key details, the things that we want to make sure fit in there? So as an example, it's got the note in here about accepting private insurance. We want to avoid the language that contributes to dental anxiety. Now, you might even go more specific than that, and then the output. So we can see that the difference between the level 1 post and the level 4 post is quite dramatic. And this would be, again, the same thing if we had an assistant in our office. If we gave them the level 1, they're going to have a lot of questions. So level 4, we've preempted that, and we've tried to answer those questions. Now we can see here, on the left side, this the Chat GPT response. It's taken and put, a picture of a family together, accepting new patients, healthy smiles for the whole family. And we've got some text around that. The Google Gemini image on the right, same thing. Incorporated that family. Everybody's smiling. They're with a dentist who's making them, feel good. The background, it's changed some things and has some, looks like colorful toys and those types of things. And then it's put together that post for us. And then the Copilot, version of it, again, very similar, because we have given it so much more context around this. All three of these are, much closer to, what we would hope to get out of that level. Now, level 5, and we don't have an example of this, but level 5 is when you start getting into, templates. So we have a couple of custom agents and GPTs that have been given to us, where the questions are predetermined, where we're clicking a button that says, I'm going to be meeting with a client this afternoon. Help me prepare an information package for them. Ask me, the questions that I need to do that. I mentioned earlier this idea of having the source documents, and this to me is one of the greatest benefits of Microsoft Copilot, and now ChatGPT as well. When you start providing it information, so these could be things like company documents, sales manuals. It could be, RFPs that you've prepared and presented in the past. Anything that allows it to understand more about who you are as a business, that information becomes part of the foundation of what it's going to present as output. The custom agents based on roles. So, we just talked about taking that knowledge base and providing that. So I'll give you an example. In our business, Microsoft Copilot, we have taken all of our sales related content. And where this has come from is it's content that we've written, it's RFPs, it's presentations, and then it's all of the recordings of all of our onboardings that we've done with members of our business development team. And we've put it all into a SharePoint folder. And we've told this agent, use the information that we've put in this folder, and you are, a whatever, a sales executive, help our sales agents, ask great questions of prospects that they're meeting with. We tell it what books we like. So, if you've ever read books like Never Split the Difference or The Challenger Sale or those types of things. And now when when I'm going to, go into a meeting with someone I've never met before, I can ask that agent, I'm going to meet with this person. They're from this company. Here's their URL. What should I be thinking about before I go in there? And it'll give us context around that would be different than if I had, built an HR agent. And then I want to highlight this last one here. Ask me 5 questions, one at a time. So all of the posts that we put in here were pretty direct. It was, we gave it an input, we got an output. What I really like to do and what I has found, gives me the absolute best outcome is that if we went back to, one of these simple ones, let's say prompt number 3 here. So if I started with this prompt and it says include an image of someone getting their teeth cleaned. Before I submit that, I would, just continue typing. I would say, before you create anything, ask me 5 questions, one at a time, to help provide input and context for what we're trying to achieve. Use that information to, you know, um, dictate the prompt that or the output that you're going to create. And what you're going to find is that it's going to take this initial prompt and it's going to ask you questions like, how long are you running this promotion? Is there a special offer? What do people like? What do people say they like most about working with your business? How is this offer or how is your business different than others in your market? And those types of things. And by having it ask you those 5 questions or 10 questions or whatever you think is appropriate, you will refine that output so much more. So just for fun, I went to a level 6, which wasn't on there, and I said, reimagine this ad, but using characters styled off the show Futurama. And we have on the left the output from ChatGPT, and to me that looks like it used the actual characters from Futurama. Um, Microsoft Copilot on the right. Yes, probably still pretty close. And the interesting thing was that Gemini, it actually came back and said, sorry, I can't do that because those characters are protected by copyright. And so again, we see each of the platforms has different capabilities and restrictions around it. So that was everything we had prepared that we wanted to throw at you. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. So I guess I will turn over to our Q&A and our chat and see. Um, I should say thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time to either hop on live or to watch this. And we'd love to connect with you if there was anything you think we could do to help you in understanding and managing technology in your business. For those who are here live right now, I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions that you might have. I'll probably just stop the recording just so it's a little bit cleaner. So thanks and have a great day.